You're listening to Off Color, a podcast where we keep it real about race and identity. I'm your host, Rebecca Henderson, aka the Tan Tigress, and I have my incredible producer with me, Janice Motzko, aka Janice of European descent, and you are about to get edumacated. Is edumacated a word? All right, what has been happening in the United States and around the world in regards to COVID-19, the global pandemic, has left us with so many questions, and the information is confusing and it changes every second. And so we just wanted to have a talk with a doctor that maybe knows some stuff, right? So we decided to have Dr. Kluger on because he's working on a book called Dangerous and Expensive Bullshit. And it is about being able to be an advocate for your health and being able to research things and having a good, solid base of information literacy.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome. I am so excited to have a dear friend, an esteemed member of the medical community. His name is Dr. Benzi Kluger. Dr. Benzi Kluger in the house. He's very serious. He's a doctor, you guys. All right. Dr. Kluger, thank you so much for coming on today. We've been really wanting to connect with people in the medical professional world as we are considering all of the systemic implications of racism in the United States of America. So, that said, welcome to the show. Dr. Kluger, I know that you are a highly regarded physician somewhere. Could you just tell us, what your title is, where you work, and go ahead.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Rebecca. And feel free to call me Benzi the rest of the podcast, whatever suits you. So I moved from Colorado about 6 months ago. I'm now at the University of Rochester Medical Center in New York. And I am the director of the Neuro-Palliative Care Division and a new Palliative Care Research Center here at the university. And that was a big part of my move, was to get some support for doing the things that I want to do.
I know that your work is incredibly important, and I just want to add that on a personal note, if I may, is that when I first met you all those years ago, I knew that you were quite intelligent, perhaps even a genius. And I was really surprised when you decided that you wanted to focus your research and your work into palliative care. My initial thought on that was, wow, what a waste, because those people are dying, right? That's really what I thought. And I just want to kind of confess that now. And then until it was time for my loved one to need palliative care. And then I really realized the importance of it and the dignity and just the humanity that we need to be having. And, the United States doesn't do death well at all. It's our worst. Besides racism, it's our second worst thing, I think.
I would definitely agree with that. Yeah. America does not know how to deal with grief, personal or collective grief.
I was going to add, when I talk about palliative care, I often joke that in the United States, it's one of the few countries in the world where we act as if death was optional. And I think that's where a lot of these misperceptions come from, that we have this idea that if we, quote, do everything, that we don't have to die. But, obviously that's not true. So we have a choice about how we die, but we really don't have much choice about when we die. And most people do not want to die in the hospital hooked up to machines. They want to die at home. They want to die surrounded by their loved ones. And that's just a small part of palliative care. And we could talk more about it, but I think palliative care, the real opportunity is helping people to live better with serious illness up until the point that they die. We can help people die well, but I think what's more important is we can help people live well up until that time.
I love that. How has the coronavirus and COVID-19, how has that affected your work and the hospital that you are in?
It's affected it in certainly some negative ways. There have been some silver linings to it. I'd say on the negative side, with my work with Neuro-Palliative Care, and just so everyone knows, that means helping people living with serious neurologic illnesses like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and ALS, as well as their families. And that's something I always emphasize with palliative care, is that we recognize that an illness like Alzheimer's doesn't just affect one person. It affects a whole family. It affects a community. That COVID has had, I think, we could talk about racial disparities, but it also has had differential effects on people with serious illness. So if you imagine a family with Alzheimer's disease, there's no more adult daycare. Families not coming by to visit. Neighbors are not coming by to help. Caregivers who are already really struggling to make things work have that much more pressure. For the person with Alzheimer's disease, they're often confused about what's going on. They don't understand why they can't go out. So it's made it, so that side of things, has made things more difficult. People are afraid to go to the hospital. That's another thing, that people don't want to come in for medical care. I don't know if you've kept up with it, but there was a major drop in strokes, heart attacks, other things going to the hospital. And so there's been this adverse impact of palliative care or on healthcare based on COVID. On the positive side, COVID, caused this immediate switch to telemedicine. And that's something that I think has been really positive. And that's something I'm doing research on and have been for the last 4 years. So for me, it was like about time that our healthcare system caught up with where we should be given the technology that we have. Because there's no reason that somebody with Alzheimer's who's in a nursing home needs to spend 4 hours to have a 45-minute visit with me. And we can easily do that and are doing it right now with this technology. And I think the other silver lining that came out of it is that people have actually recognized how important palliative care is. Because with COVID, particularly COVID in the hospital, people in the ICU, we don't have a cure. We can't save everybody. People are dying in the hospital alone because we don't want their family to be there and to be at risk. And so there have been a lot of palliative care issues that have come up, and I think a huge heightening of awareness of how important palliative care is to helping people with serious illness. And with my own practice moving here, I would say that I'm a year ahead of where I thought I would be because of COVID, because people are referring to me more, because I can see their patients via telemedicine. We're becoming more integrated. So there has been this kind of silver lining, to what's undeniably, a tragedy. But, we still try to make the best of it.
Wow. I mean, when you said the telemedicine piece, because I've had telemedicine a couple times since the start of the pandemic, and I was like, damn, this is the best. I'm never going to the doctor again, because most of the shit that I need to go to the doctor for, I don't need to go to the doctor for.
Right.
I'm like, my back hurts. She's like, here's some 800 milligram ibuprofen. I'm like, sweet.
Yeah.
My back hurts.
You guys, my back. My back hurts. Okay. So something that you said struck me also is telehealth. I'm wondering if that is a way that we can use to sort of make medical access more equitable. Is that the goal of it? Can you speak a little bit more on your research around that?
Yeah. There's two sides of it. So telehealth addresses some disparities. And I would say that it has made it easier for people with significant disabilities, with transportation problems in rural areas to some extent, to get medical care, but it hasn't addressed racial disparities. It also hasn't addressed, and we could talk more about this, class and economic disparities and the intersection of the two. And there have been, I think it was disappointing, a friend of mine at Rochester, Ray Dorsey, who's done a lot with telehealth, when they finished the result of this large trial, the demographics of their population looked identical to the demographics of almost every other study that's been done in Parkinson's disease, which is that it's 92% white, it's educated people in higher socioeconomic status. And so I think telehealth provides a useful tool, but it's not really addressing the root cause of the problem. And that's a big question. And I've been thinking a lot about it, and I don't know all of the answers. I mean, I know there is a lack of trust. There are cultural issues. There are education issues. There's visibility issues. There's the face of healthcare does not match the face of people living in communities, and we know that people get better care from people of their same gender and of their same racial and ethnic background. So there's a huge litany of problems, and I think telemedicine has the potential to help, but it's definitely not the answer.
So let's take a dive into some of the things that you just talked about. Can you just talk a little bit more about what it was and then how it ended up like that without getting like too deep into the stuff that I will be like, I don't know what you're talking about, bro.
So the study that we did, which I'm really proud of, was a study where we were looking at palliative care and seeing if a palliative care approach would improve outcomes for people living with Parkinson's and their family caregivers. And we compared palliative care to usual care, and not surprisingly, palliative care resulted in better symptom control for patients, better quality of life. People had a roadmap of the future. They completed their advanced care plans. They had less grief. Caregivers had better outcomes. They had less burden. They had less anxiety. They had better spiritual well-being. So from that standpoint, it was a very successful study. When it comes to diversity, our study looked like every other study that's been done in Parkinson's, which was it was 92% white. And so I'm actually addressing this right now. A comment to our paper was, what about diversity? Can we take the results of your study and really know that we can apply this to non-white people? And we can't.
Does Parkinson's actually affect white people more, or what are the demographics within the illness that this is so surprising?
Well, so the demographics are that it's possible, and we don't even know this actually, that Parkinson's may be slightly less common in African Americans. Certainly not to the degree of like 92% white. That's definitely inaccurate. That Asians may be slightly more, Hispanics probably about equal to white. But if we looked at what we would expect to find, just like in Colorado, based on the diversity of the communities in Colorado, it wouldn't be 92% white. So we were clearly missing African Americans and Hispanic and other populations. And I think also if we were to look deeper at it, we were missing people of lower socioeconomic status. We were missing people, with lower education. So there's clearly disparities. And we know this in society in general. If you look at Parkinson's, that if you look at things like race and socioeconomic status, that people who are Black, people of lower socioeconomic status, lower educational attainment, are less likely to see a specialist, less likely to see a neurologist, less likely to get the most advanced treatments, actually less likely to get any treatment. They have worse outcomes. So I don't think what we found was unique to the study. I think it's reflective of these larger societal and structural barriers. One of the things I'm also reflecting on is, could I or should our study team and others have done more to address this? And I think it would have actually taken, because of the society that we live in, a lot of resources for our study to reflect the population that we're serving. And I think in light of recent national events, academic medicine and academic medical centers are really taking a step back and asking the questions of, what have we done to contribute to this situation? Because academic medical centers certainly aren't blameless. If you look at the history of research, if you look at the history of, who gets into medical school, that academic medical centers, are certainly, not innocent victims that we just happen to be in a racist country. But, what are the opportunities that we have, and what are the unique position that we have in society that we could change this? And so that's been something I've been thinking a lot about, trying to, see, are there ways that we can create stronger bridges with the community? In Rochester is a kind of interesting community. It's kind of like Minneapolis in that it's a very liberal city and one that's super racist. And if you compare the county that I'm living in, Brighton, to inner city Rochester, there's about a 10-year difference in life expectancy.
Higher or lower? You're saying the liberal area has a higher.
Well, it's a liberal city, but if you look at one way of looking at it, if you look at the rich white area, compared to the poorer Black areas, there's over a decade difference in life expectancy. And so that was actually on a call on Friday where we were talking about, mission and vision of our department and divisions. And one of our faculty was talking about, having outreach programs to Peru and, and things like that, which are cool and important. But, let's start going like 3 miles away, or 2 miles away from our academic medical center. How do we get there? I mean, and what's ironic is that it was actually easier for us to imagine how we were going to help people in Peru than it was for us to imagine how are we going to help people in inner city Rochester.
Now, I want to poke on you on that.
Yeah, poke it.
Okay, so what I want to know is why do you think, and this may get into the personal, why do you think it's easier for people to think about reaching out to other countries like Peru versus, working in our own communities here in the U.S.?
I think one thing is like there's the sexy factor, which is that it's a lot sexier, to have an outreach program in Peru and to stay in a village in Peru. I was actually thinking about creating a medical student elective where people would stay in inner city Rochester and be hosted by a family in inner city Rochester. Because I think it would, in some ways, kind of blow people's minds, because there's going to be automatic resistance to that. Like, oh, that's dangerous. Well, why? Why is that dangerous? Why is that, so much seemingly more impossible than going to Peru? It seems like, in Peru, there's a lack of resources that are society-wide. And so we can bring in medicine, we can bring in medical education. It's like the problems are pretty well defined. In the United States, I feel like the problems are more complicated. Why is it this particular group of people? And I think some of it, which we don't talk enough about, really is class. And I was reading about, the intersection of class, nation, and race.
White people be talking about class all the time, Benzi, and I feel like it is a deflection from the real issue of racism. And so I know that is something I push back on consistently.
Yeah.
Not saying it's not true. I'm not saying it's not true, but I feel like it is a way for people to say it's not about race, it's about class. That's very, very common language. And the truth of the matter is the class is existing because of the race.
I think it's an intersection, but I would say that if you were to look at the 8% of people who are non-white and taking part in our studies, that they're probably middle and upper class, African Americans and Asians and Latinos. And at the same time, if you look at the 92% of people that are white, that we're underrepresenting people who are white, who are living in inner city Rochester or who are, of lower class. So I feel like if our goal is really to provide the best care possible to everybody, that some of these issues, I think race is important. But I also think that class is important, and I think the intersection of the two, may be even more important. But I think if we just focus on race, I guess my concern is that may even become a form of racism, because then we're looking at how race is causing this problem when it's not just race; it's the intersection of race and class and capitalism and the nation that we're a part of. It wouldn't be African Americans, but Black people in other countries probably don't face the same kind of barriers that they do in this country. So if we just take race and look at it by itself, then I think we might distort the actual problems and not come up with the best solution.
So you're saying that Black people in America face unique barriers to Black people in the rest of the world, and to do a large-scale study, it might skew some of the results or the data because we're just taking into effect the skin color and not necessarily all of these other local factors?
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying, and this is getting towards the edge of my expertise, but if you just look at race and ignore where people are, like in the United States, ignore the effects of capitalism and class, that you're really not getting a complete picture. And that the problem that you're looking at is not, is not the most formulated, because then you're looking at race as this unique thing, and race and racism, which are important, but there may be other barriers, societal and structural and economic, that play into it that may not have much to do with race.
But they're all based on systemic racism, Benzi. All of the things that you're talking about. Sorry, Janice,
No, you do not have to apologize to me. I wanted to bring up conversations that we've had previously, Rebecca, you and I, to say we've talked multiple times about generational wealth and how specifically descendants of slaves have a significant generational wealth line than Black people that have immigrated here since slavery has ended. And that there are disparities there that just saying, okay, I am a person, or I am a Black person, doesn't necessarily go deep enough into all of the levels of anti-Blackness in America, that there are Black descendants of slaves.
Black descendants of enslaved people. They weren't born slaves. They were born people. Slavery was something that was done to them.
Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, and maybe, and you could, potentially educate me. I guess part of what I'm seeing is that, with my goal being that I want to provide the best care possible to everybody, regardless of race, regardless of wealth, regardless of education, that I feel like the barriers, and there may be barriers, that if somebody is Black and middle class or upper class, that the barriers to coming to see me are going to be different than somebody who's Black, who's a lower class or lower education status, and that some of their barriers may be more similar to white people in that same class. So if my goal is to get people the best care possible, I feel like I need to not look at race in isolation, I guess would be what I'm saying.
I can't argue with that. Because that's true, and I believe in intersectionality, of course. I really caution, especially because it seems like you may be taking sort of the lead on this.
Oh, not at all. I'm not. Yeah, I mean, I want to be involved, but I'm not a leader in this.
Let me tell you, Benzi, I need you to be a leader. And I'm going to tell you why. Because you know me. And, my grandfather had Parkinson's. It's in the back of my mind that's a possibility for me, right?
Yep.
And I am that middle class Black person that would definitely go to the doctor, and I wouldn't have an issue with that. So of course it is related to socioeconomic. I really caution people around that language because I feel like it gives people a chance to just deflect from interrogating their own, for white people, like internalized dominance, like this idea that they're inherently superior and they don't even know that they are thinking that, but that's how it's playing out. And so that whenever I hear that, my spidey sense or whatever, it starts to tingle, and I'm like, no, don't you just try to make this go away because of class. And so when you said, well, I think that the barriers, I want to know, what are the barriers? Do you know what the barriers are?
I don't know. I mean, and to your comment, I mean, I think one of the things that I've been inspired by, and I'm sure you've talked about it, like Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, to me was really eye-opening. And I read it earlier this year. I think I read it in March. But it really got me thinking about, and I think the events of the nation have gotten everybody thinking about, but I think me even more so, of what can I do to change the situation, which is really unacceptable. And I think one of the points that I was also trying to make in this letter that I'm writing about my study is that if I was going to be researching, say, a rare disease, I wouldn't consider it adequate to just, to have an advisor who has that disease and then write a grant and think that I'm going to be able to get people with that illness. I have to make it multi-site. I have to get other experts involved. I have to basically take it seriously because it's going to be an issue. And up until now, I feel with a few exceptions that people haven't taken this issue as seriously as it needs to be taken, that we're not providing the best care possible to everybody, that we're not studying even things like palliative care. There's known to be disparities in palliative care, and that we're not addressing it as this, really serious public health problem that it is, that there are people who are not doing well simply because they don't have access to the right care. So it has gotten me motivated and thinking about it more, but I think as a first step, and this is, kind of my approach to other things in science, is that, I think the first step is really finding out and understanding the problem. There's been some research, and I have to look more into it, that have figured out some strategies that are successful. So it's not that it's totally unknown. I need to become better educated, so that I can design and conduct better studies. But there's definitely a lot more work that needs to be done in order to move the field forward, because, I would hope that 5 years and 10 years from now, that the studies that we do, that we have, equal mix of genders. And that was actually a big thing that the NIH was pushing for, is that we knew a lot about heart attacks in men, and then learned that heart attacks in women actually look different, and that women may respond differently to treatment. And so it's not good medicine and it's not good science to do all of your studies in rich white men.
It's not good for the economy to have all white men be controlling everything since the inception of the nation. Okay?
Exactly. And that's another thing that I think I'm thinking about and we're thinking about as medical centers. And this is going to be like a decades long process, is how do we get our doctors, like the faculty of medical schools and deans of medical schools, to also reflect the diversity of our country. I don't know. That was part of why Ibram Kendi's book was so eye-opening to me, is that I think I had internalized, even though I didn't think of myself as racist, that I just internalized that there were cultural and that there were these other things. Like I didn't recognize like how much systemic policy was behind, the differences that we see at an institutional level. I think the dialogue that's happening in this country is awesome and amazing. I'm hoping that it becomes a silver lining of the events of the nation in recent years, that we actually, that we can't unsee this as a problem anymore. But it's going to take a lot of work, to change it, because it's not like I can just, hire an African-American dean to a medical school. We have to educate people that we need African-American doctors, we need African-American leaders in research, across the board. So
I bet you could find one. I bet you could find one in 5 minutes. My cousin's a doctor, okay? I got several doctors in the family. I will send you a note. Speaking of notes, I was wondering, how is your book going?
Yeah, so the book that Rebecca's referring to is currently titled Dangerous and Expensive Bullshit. And it is a guide to helping people make better medical decisions in the age of misinformation. So that's the subtext of it. So I would say there's kind of two big thrusts of this book, and I would say the initial impetus for it, came from a lot of my patients who are coming in and they read on the internet that they can get stem cell infusions in Mexico to cure their Parkinson's disease, or that they should, get on some diet, or we've seen in the news a whole lot of bullshit around how to prevent and cure COVID. Coming from all kinds of places and all kinds of people. So that's definitely one part of this book is how do I do a better job, or how can I help people do a better job of recognizing and avoiding bullshit that's dangerous and expensive to them and dangerous to their family.
I was going to say, you and I are so aligned on misinformation. I think that is probably our strongest connection, Dr. Kluger. Is that, because I can't stand like wrong misinformation being spread all over the internet, and then I hate it. It's a real big deal for me as a library scientist.
And I feel that COVID, like a lot of things, like COVID made disparities more visible. COVID, I think, has really made the dangers of misinformation very visible. Because there was misinformation before COVID, obviously. But it's like become very apparent, look at Florida.
I don't want to. I want to look away.
So if you're making decisions based on bad information, reality is always going to catch up with you. That's just an unfortunate fact of living on this planet. So we've got to make the best decisions possible based on the best information possible. A second thing that came up as I was developing this book, though, it's kind of asking the deeper question of why is it so easy for pseudo experts to publish a book and get people to follow their diet. So that's a big question. And as I got into the book, I think the problem is that the general public feels very disempowered when it comes to healthcare. That there's this model in place where doctors and scientists and others have esoteric information that the public does not have, and thus they have this power. That people become dependent on experts for healthcare decisions in a way that they don't for any other aspect of their life. And I use the example of a car. Like you wouldn't put stem cells in your car. You wouldn't put bleach in your gas tank. So why do people do that to their own body?
Because Donald Trump told them to drink bleach.
I think people would actually be more likely to put bleach in their body if Donald Trump did than to put bleach in their car. And I think people are more likely to take advice from Donald Trump when it comes to healthcare, then no one's going to take their car to Donald Trump and expect him to fix it. But they may believe him when it comes to vaccines, or they may believe him when it comes to other things. And so if you look actually in the among best-selling books in the healthcare section, over half of them are bullshit. And you don't find that same thing for computers or for cars or for other areas of information. So I feel like this issue, what I would call the expertocracy of medicine, and what I would call like democratizing healthcare, I feel like that's kind of really the heart of this book, is helping empower people to not be so dependent on the expertocracy and to take their power back to be an active voice in healthcare decisions.
So what about people who are saying that those bullshit books, the things that you are saying are not is their way of empowering themselves? Because I feel like that's what that whole movement is about. Like, oh, I can cure myself. I can listen to this. So how do we filter through like this kind of junky science and get to the good information?
Yeah, so there are, and we could have a whole series of podcasts going through, different areas of this, but one place to start is what I would call building a basic bullshit detector. So if you see, your friend sends you a Facebook page or something, and it has the word miraculous or revolutionary, chances are it's bullshit. If there is a product that claims to cure multiple issues that are not really related to each other, like you can do hyperbaric oxygen for cancer, you can use it for Alzheimer's disease, you can use it for MS, it's probably bullshit. There's not a lot of things that cure everything. And I'm trying to think of some other ones, off the top of my head, from that list.
Okay, well, I'll give you an example. I'll ask you a question now. Okay, ready? What can colloidal silver do for you?
All right, colloidal silver. I'm fascinated by this. My dad was obsessed with colloidal silver. It's a whole thing in our family, so...
You might have to educate me. What are people claiming colloidal silver is good for? Because that's one thing that people with Parkinson's don't come to me about.
So... Colloidal silver is a suspension of nanoparticles of silver in water, for those people that are not familiar. And before there were antibiotics, it was seen as an effective antimicrobial, antibacterial that could either be ingested or used topically to treat infections and basic illnesses before we even really understood how bacteria worked. Mm-hmm. So it went out of favor when antibiotics came out, and has kind of made a resurgence is being touted as a form of antimicrobial that bacteria and other microbes can't form an immunity to, like antibiotics. So I've seen everything from it can cure brain tumors to other forms of cancer in your body. But I have also seen a much milder acceptance of it, of treating things like sore throats and chronic bronchitis, quickly healing surface wounds, scratches, scrapes, things like that, because it's an effective antibacterial.
So what, it's actually, even while you're talking, so I was pulling things up, and this is actually how I would handle this in clinic. And this is like based on the book is I don't know some things. I don't know that much about colloidal silver. I can get online, I can find, and this is something, these are skills that people can have of finding access to good information. And actually Rebecca, may be able to help people as well from her library science background. But yeah, so it looks like colloidal silver has been touted, as you said, for antibiotics, as a cure for HIV, as a cure for various types of cancer, as a cure for Lyme disease. It looks like colloidal silver, has not been shown to, and we could also look this up, it has any evidence behind it that it can actually do any of those things. And this is part of the book, is talking about why it's so important to do placebo-controlled trials, that we really need evidence for things before we can say that they're safe or not. And colloidal silver, it can cause skin problems, something called aguria. Mm-hmm. It can interfere with drug absorption, so people can actually counteract medications that they need. So it looks like this would definitely fall into, or maybe I'll add it to the book as a form of dangerous and expensive bullshit that they're just right now in 30 seconds, mm-hmm. and I could teach people how to do this. you can find out that colloidal silver probably is not going to cure your AIDS
Probably not.
or your
Probably not.
HIV or your cancer, and that your money is going to be better spent, seeing a real doctor and finding things that have evidence behind it. But, I would say, and this I think is a difference about my approach in my book versus other things out there, is that I'm not biased and automatically opposed to all alternative medicine. Like I've done studies on acupuncture. I'll recommend acupuncture to some people. I'll talk about medical marijuana and what it may be helpful for or not helpful for and the limits of the evidence, and then we can make a decision together based on that person's values and what's important to them of how we'd want to move forward. But the danger is that if you think that there's a medical industrial complex and that we're out to get you and your money, and so instead you turn around and buy colloidal silver from somebody who's even more crooked, you're still hurting yourself. You're just hurting yourself in a different way.
Interesting.
I feel like that, yeah, sorry. I feel like that was so important, though, to say, like, if you're thinking that the doctors are bullshit, then it's like, which bullshit should I take?
Yeah.
But what is like your liability around that? Like, if people are talking about like emerging treatments or therapies, like if I say to you, Benzi, I'm going crazy for my depression and I want to take some magic mushrooms for it. If I said that, what would you say?
Yeah. So, yeah, and we could, have a conversation about that. And I would actually take a step backwards though, because I think the distrust in the medical system, part of it, I feel like, and you can both, tell me your experiences, but I feel like part of it is discouragement, that you go to doctors and you feel like you're not seen or heard, that people aren't listening to what you think are important. And so it's natural that you're going to go to an acupuncturist or you're going to go to a complementary medicine doctor or you're going to go to a dangerous quack who's at least going to pretend to listen to you and give you power. And they still have their product to sell, which may be even more dangerous. But they're doing it in a different way. And I think that the medical profession, by not being as person-centered as it could or should be, has pushed a lot of people away from medicine into alternative medicine. But anyway, so if you came in and you wanted to know about magic mushrooms for anxiety, again, I don't consider myself an expert in that area. There have been studies of psilocybin for death anxiety and palliative care. There have been some for depression. There have been some for addiction. But I think we would start by, taking a look through the literature together, see if there are any evidence of it helping anxiety. If there is, great. And we can try to follow those guidelines, see what the studies say. If there's not, then we'd have to have a discussion about the potential risks and benefits. And we do know that there are risks to, magic mushrooms, particularly at higher doses for certain people. And particularly if people have psychiatric issues or if they have schizophrenia or other major problems, then it could be dangerous. So I always consider my job, first and foremost is to try to give people guidance that's going to keep them safe, and then I would say, secondly, I want to understand them and their values and see what we can do to work together to achieve their health goals. And I'm not above using placebos. I'm not above encouraging them to do things that I may not believe in myself, as long as they're safe, but we work on a plan together and keep that dialogue open, as opposed to, I think a common response from doctors is, in a nutshell, no, that's stupid. Let's talk about getting you on this antidepressant, and there's no discussion of values. There's no discussion about why I think this antidepressant is best for you. No questioning of why you're afraid of taking an antidepressant. And so we end up, there's, we miss a chance for connection, and I'm not an effective doctor, in part because I haven't seen you as a person.
So there's science misinformation, and then there is flat out science denialism.
Yeah.
Going around right now. And I found a resource called the FLICC method, FLICC. Are you familiar with that at all?
No.
So it's a series of techniques that have been identified within the science denialism community, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word. And there are things like fake experts, logical fallacies, impossible expectations, cherry-picking data, conspiracy theories. The authors of these techniques that research these techniques have put together a way to kind of filter through information that you're getting to see if it's full-on science denialism versus just misinformation. And I was wondering if any of that is going to be included in your book, or if you have comments on that.
Yeah, there's another book that you may be interested in. I was just looking at my bookshelf. It's called Believing Bullshit. Stephen Law is the author, and he's a philosopher. And I think he has 9, and they're actually, similar to what you just described in FLICC, but he kind of has 9 major rules. What he describes as philosophical black holes that people get stuck in.
That sounds it's very right up easy my alley. I love it.
Yeah. So you should check it out. It's a cool book, and it's well articulated, and I think he does a good job of pointing out fallacies without attacking people. He doesn't come down and state what his specific beliefs are. He just states why these particular creationists are using a logical fallacy to promote their ideas, and why, whether you believe in creationism or not, should not accept that argument. So yeah, that is a focus, and there's going to be a chapter dedicated in the book around critical thinking. Because I feel like, one aspect of this book that is a hole that gets filled is that we don't do a very good job, I would say in this country, maybe in the world, of teaching critical thinking.
Because critical thinking will fuck up capitalism, Benzi.
Well, I know it's dangerous. If you're talking about an expertocracy and you're talking about power, critical thinking is dangerous. That if people start thinking for themselves, who knows where that's going to lead.
I just want to ask some questions, and I'm going to it's going to be like a trial, see how it works. Okay, here we go. I'm going to pretend to be someone who called in. Oh, hello. My name is Greta, and I was wondering if I should wear my mask because I heard they don't prevent corona and it's violating my civil rights.
Well, Greta, that's a interesting question. I would be curious to know where you got your information from.
I got it from the president.
Uh-huh. Well, so let's talk it through. So if you have a mask and it's a clean mask, there's quite a bit of evidence, including from hospitals, that does prevent coronavirus. And I think one of the things that was interesting and surprising early on was that in the coronavirus wards, the rates of healthcare workers getting coronavirus was lower initially than in the general hospital. And that's because they were taking precautions and wearing masks. So the precautions of hand washing and wearing masks and keeping a distance, they work. So I would strongly encourage you, Greta, to do so. And if you have specific sources of information or things from the president, I'd be happy to look at them with you and see if they seem credible.
No, thank you. I'm a crazy person. Goodbye. Click. Okay, next caller. Hello, Dr. Kluger. My name is Joe, and I want to know, is it safe to touch anything? Should we wipe down everything or what? How is it? Do you know?
It's a good question, Joe. That has also evolved, and we can also look at some of the evidence together if you'd want to. Initially, before when coronavirus first came out, we didn't know a lot about it, and so we were very cautious. And there is evidence, and this is true, is that coronavirus can survive on certain surfaces and plastics for over 24 hours. What the other thing that does appear to be true, though, is that the amount of the virus that you would need to get infected is pretty high. And so the most efficient way to get the virus is actually to breathe in droplets. So I think if you are good about hand washing, you're good about masks, you're good about social distancing, that you don't need to be overly paranoid about washing every single thing down and bleaching it and stuff which some people did at the beginning of this pandemic. And I think everyone has different comfort levels.
Thank you, Dr. Kluger. That was good information. Okay, next caller. Okay, wait, we have one more call. Okay, all right. Hello, my name is Elizabeth, and I was wondering, I heard that cannabis was preventing the COVID-19 in an article in the New York Post, and I love cannabis, and I just wondered, is it saving my life?
Well, Elizabeth, I don't think there's any great research on cannabis for COVID-19, and we can look that up together. If you enjoy cannabis, I don't have any problem with you using it, and it may help you with coping with social distancing or other parts of your life. And as far as I know, I don't even think people are studying it, and I don't even have an idea what the mechanism of it would be.
I saw it in the New York Post. Could you please Google that article and find out?
All right, here it goes from May 21st. The article starts off with scientists believe. That's a little bit of a red flag right there. Let's take a look at the article and see where they're coming up with this from. A team of Canadian scientists believes it has found strong strains of cannabis that could prevent or treat coronavirus infections, according to interviews and a study. Hemp extracts high in CBD may block proteins that provide a gateway for COVID-19. Let's see if we can find the study here. So I'll have to, if you wanted to talk about this more, I can read it more carefully, but it looks like what they did was they just had cellular models that showed that it increases something called ACE2 expression, which is a target for COVID. The thing that I would say, though, about it is that there are ACE blockers that have already been proven to not work. So they're kind of going down the road of a mechanism that's been hypothesized to be important, but has been shown to not work using other drugs. So it'd be a pretty big leap to go for, and this happens all the time in news articles, that people do a study in an animal or in a cellular model, and then the headline comes out, scientists believe that cannabis cures cancer, or cannabis cures COVID. And this is a perfect example of that. So there's about 5 years of research that needs to happen before we can go from this article to people. And I would bet a lot of money that it's not going to work, because we know other strategies that have used the same target that have failed in people. So I don't think it's going to get even nearly that far. And the other thing is that the levels of CBD needed in these tissue models may not even be safely achievable in people. And so getting the right dose and all those things are further barriers. And again, I would say, and I'm hoping this is what the book is about, is that anybody, you don't need me to take a look at this article if you know what to look for, to come away from it saying, I hope that works out. I may or may not waste my money on it.
But if you already happen to have some in the home, perhaps.
And use it. Yeah, share it. But so I don't know which scientists believe that. I think that's a little bit of a misleading headline.
That's a little bit of a red flag.
I'm a scientist.
They won't even name the actual scientists and their credentials.
I'm a scientist, and I do not believe that CBD is ever going to be a cure for COVID-19.
Well, as a library scientist, I think it cures it. I think it's curing it.
Yeah. Well, you haven't gotten it yet. I mean, that's another
knock on wood.
Another clue there is anecdotal evidence.
Yeah.
So people rely a lot on anecdotal evidence. They say, I've been smoking cannabis for the last 3 months and I haven't gotten coronavirus.
Yeah, so therefore it prevents it, except that...
Therefore it works.
Oh my God. Dr. Kluger, there's so many things. I feel like we could talk about this for hours. And so I'm sure we will. And in the future, I want to stop and thank you. Is there anything you'd like to add, or that we didn't ask you?
I think we covered a lot for this episode. But yeah, I think in the future, and as I get writing more, I mean, I have a top 21 list of bullshit detector things. So I think that would be a fun episode to do, is kind of just go down the list, and talk about these bullshit detection tools, and hopefully provide your listeners with a bullshit detector that can immediately help them and their family while waiting for me to find an agent.
I think each one of those could be its very own podcast, and you need to get your own thing going, and we will help you out, because I love this stuff. I have been on both sides of the scientific spectrum, from complete science denial to complete science acceptance, and sometimes it just depends on the topic. So I would really love to continue those conversations, and I think Rebecca would as well.
Yeah. So we'll carry on
Yeah.
with that. And then my final question that I'd like to ask every guest. Tell us about the last time you shit your pants.
Last time I shit my pants. Yeah, it happened embarrassingly not long ago enough. Because I don't know about you, but I'm one of those people who will occasionally get like running induced bowel urgency. And sometimes it happens when I'm like far from a bathroom. And so I like turn around and then I have to do like this awkward walk home, and it's kind of embarrassing, and I go right to the shower. So.
I love the scientific term that you used for that. What is that?
Yeah, I just made it up.
See, this is how it happened.
But because I went to medical school, I'm good at making up bullshit.
I was like, this is how they get you, you know? You just put a bunch of fancy words together and suddenly it's a syndrome. Yeah,
use a Latin phrase, use some fancy words, and then it's like, oh, okay, yeah. This guy must know what he's talking about.
Thank you so much, Benzi. It was so good to see your face from far away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Off Color is a Tan Tigress production, produced and edited by Janice Matsko. And if you want to keep up to date on all things Off Color, follow us on Facebook at Off Color Podcast, on Twitter, Off Color Pod. If you love the work and you want to support it, try checking out our Tan Tigress Patreon. It's listeners like you that make this all possible. So thank you. Mine, I have the hum of my broken air conditioner and I can't turn it off.
Awesome.
So
see if I can fix it in post.
Enjoy.